Infill showing through to perimeters, lines around a box, and Ivan Miranda really showing off Blobs of Doom. All this and more, Print Fix Friday, episode 62. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here and you got some 3D printing failures, remember you can hit us up on all the social media platforms, slide into them DMs, or tag us in a post and use the hashtag PrintFix so we can take a look at it, make sure that we include it in these videos. And if you do like this kind of thing and you are working on getting your printer back up and running, make sure to hit that like button and get subscribed. Greatly appreciate your support. Got a lot of good fails for you, so stick around, get your favorite snack. It's going to be a fun one. But what may not be as much fun is my segue to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. We get it. 3D printing is not always the easiest, and failure can happen to anybody. Heck, myself included. There's one of my fails coming up in this video. And it's not always the easiest thing to deal with because, well, you might not know what's going on. And that's when it's good to call the pros over at 3D Musketeers. With over 40 years of combined industry experience, 15 of those are mine alone, we have the expertise to get your machines up and running, or minimally get those parts onto our machines so you can get back to actually servicing your machines and we can help you get those jobs finished. Last week, we actually talked all about the printers that we might recommend to buy for first timers. Well, this weekend, which is likely going to be on Sunday, we're going to be talking all about good printers for business owners, people that are looking to start a business doing 3D printing, what printers they might buy. It's a little bit different than what we might recommend for first timers, so stick around if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. But we recognize that it's not always plug and play, and I don't care how much money you spend, you're going to have to do some form of maintenance. Even if you are spending the money on diamond nozzles, all metal hot ends, and all the right things, other stuff can go wrong. And well, that's why we have a bank of 3D printers that are normally ready, willing, and able to help you make awesome every single day. And we don't just do 3D printing here at 3D Musketeers. We do full product development, invention assistance, as well as high-end 3D scanning, laser cutting, and CNC milling. That's the kind of stuff you want. Hit us up. Links in that description down below. But enough of me failing to really get my entire point across that 3D Musketeers just kind of makes awesome every single day. Let's get into fixing other people's failures, and one of my own, I guess. Why does my infill pattern show through? I even have 3 walls. This one's actually a lot easier than you might think. It is your infill overlap percentage. Now, inside of Prusa Slicer, let's get a fresh opening of Prusa Slicer. Let's take a look at this because it's actually a pretty easy setting to look at. And stock on Prusas, it's normally around 20%. But let's go and take a look. There you go. 25% for a stock 0.2 quality Mark III's. If you have too much overlap, you're going to see that infill through into the walls. But the other thing that we have going on here is that with silk filament, ringing can be really obvious. And if you're over extruding even a little bit and it's coming out into that outer perimeter, it can hit it basically and cause a bit of ringing. I don't think it is the ringing thing. I firmly believe this is an infill overlap percentage. So that should solve this one. Nice and simple. Let's move on. Line around the bottom of box where walls start. We've actually talked about this one in the past with the benchy boat. A lot of times benchies will have a line at their bow. In fact, this one hilariously it's a different color. The line is not technically there, but it's a different color for a little bit. So it's a great way to show it. Basically, you are mildly over extruding. It's not a ton, but you're over extruding enough that your solid infill layers are pushing out ever so slightly. It's okay. It's a relatively easy thing to fix. Just go in, look at calibrating your extrusion multiplier, or realistically, you can cut your flow by maybe 2 or 3% and you should be all right. To check something like this, you can run benchies. They've got that nice flat surface to determine what is going on. And yes, don't worry, benchy dive video coming relatively soon. Maybe after the holidays, though. We got a lot of content already scheduled for before the holidays, so want to make sure we get that in time. But yeah, it's a little bit of over extrusion. It should be easily solved. The rest of the part looks pretty clean. You've got some ringing here, and that's these vertical lines that you guys see. That is from acceleration and deceleration. With most printers, really the only way that you can tune this out is to be messing with your acceleration, figure out one where the printer doesn't resonate as much, or look at using something like Clipper where you can utilize input shaping to quite literally anti-vibrate out your ringing, which is pretty cool. And on printers with V wheels, it is more common to see ringing just because they have more slop in them traditionally than something that does utilize ball bearings. Delaminating. So initially when I looked at this one, I said, oh, it's ABS, right? It looks like traditional ABS delaminating. And in fact, we can even see where the delaminating is occurring. The first bit of it occurred right there, and the second bit of it occurred right there. And that is the part coming up into the path of the nozzle and the nozzle trying to figure itself out. So it warped twice. We can see it is pulling away from the build plate ever so slightly. Tighten up on that way. Here, we'll enhance it for you. Where it's a little bit lighter here around this edge. Can you enhance him right here? I can. Where it's a little light around this edge, that is absolutely your part delaminating a little bit. It's delaminating from the build plate. This is technically layer delamination, but it is a cooling thing. I know that ABS is known for having cooling issues where if you cool it too fast, it will shrink a lot and it has a tendency to delaminate. PETG can do something similar. And unfortunately, they're 4 days deep into this print. And I hate to say it, but if you need dimensional accuracy, your print's done. It's time to restart it. Now, in a case like this, and you're running a big PETG part, it is best to have an enclosed printer. Now, this can be done incredibly jank. It can be done reasonably well, or it can be done on next level. Jank AF, get a cardboard box and put it on top of the printer. Now, note, obviously there is an inherent fire hazard that goes on there. And if you want to use something like the Wham Bam Cloud, obviously code Musketeers 2022 for 10% off through the end of 2022, you can pick one up. They're like 30 bucks. And they're singular printer fire extinguisher systems that are automatic. When flames hit it, it dumps a bunch of ABC fire extinguisher media out onto the printer, theoretically destroying the fire. We will be testing those in an upcoming video, so if that is the kind of thing you want to see, which is me setting another printer on fire, with an enclosure that I'm going to make out of wood, because it's a do or die situation as far as I'm concerned, make sure you get subscribed. But in a case like this, you need to make sure that you enclose your printer. You could instead go after something like a Wham Bam hotbox. They're relatively affordable, depends on the size of the printer, obviously, and they're just insulated boxes like what a pizza would come in, but they're just bigger. The trick with the hot box is make sure you hold on to the shipping box that it comes with, because you can repack it back in there when you need to store the box. Because for things like PLA, a heated enclosure or a temperature controlled enclosure without any airflow around it can actually be detrimental if it gets too warm. Now, we will be showing off the Wham Bam hot boxes coming soon as well. I want to compare them to traditional methods, as well as some methods that are a bit on the nines, right? If you have a smaller printer, a lac rack or a lac end table style of enclosure is good enough. And if you are a computer geek or you happen to have one of these laying around, or you can get one for cheap near you, server racks are awesome 3D printer storage racks. One, they've got tons of storage space. Two, they're designed to hold tons of weight. And three, they generally don't have anything on them that is flammable. So in the event of a catastrophic meltdown of your printer, for whatever reason that might be, you'll be good. But yeah, you got to look at maintaining your temperature. And soon, TM, we will have our politician released. I am currently testing the most recent revision of it, where we are heavily simplifying its bill of materials and theoretically should not reduce performance, but I'm doing a long-term test right now to find out. But that is our filter and heater combination designed for resin printing, but would be awesome for FDM printing as well, because it is capable of up to 60 degrees centigrade. So something to note there as well. But course, coming soon, TM. I want to get into a personal fail. For those that don't know, we do 3D printing, and part of that 3D printing is also assisting those that own 3D printers in repairing their machines. We did a house call. We went out to a family's home about half an hour away. They have an Ender 5 Pro, and I was actually there on Tuesday, and I spent about an hour and a half going through this printer, and I noticed the hot end would heat up fine, no issues, but every single time you went to turn on the heat bed, it would shut off the printer. The printer would basically shut down and then come back online. Normally that says, all right, we've probably got an electrical short. It's a Creality printer, so it's probably got soldered wire ends. It did have soldered wire ends, so went through, cut, stripped wire, put everything back in, tightened it down nice, good, so it won't ever be an issue for them again, but the issue still persisted. So, okay, let's cut the motherboard out of the situation and just direct connected the heat bed to the power supply, right? There's no craziness going on in the motherboard. It's just switching on or switching off the feed from the power supply going to the heat bed. The heat bed still caused the power supply to shut off, so it was going into overcurrent, which is fine. That's what they're designed to do, you know? That's good that it's happening. And so I say, yeah, your heat bed probably has a short, but I look at it and say, this heat bed looks brand new. The printer looked brand new. I guess they've had it for about a year now and haven't had a lot of luck getting it running. Long story short, power supply was set to 230 volts. And I didn't check until like an hour and a half deep into this, when I'm really looking at the power supply to verify, is it outputting the right voltage? It was, if it was at 230 volts. I do have a little bit of a reprieve in that when we did get the printer up and running, the Z steps per millimeter were set very wrong. And actually, I want to give a shout out to one of our Patreon supporters. I believe it was 5HFR, but it might have been one of our other Patreon supporters. And if I did not properly give you credit, let me know and I will pin your comment saying that it was actually you. To put a power drill on the rotary encoder, because for those that don't know, to adjust steps per millimeter on these Melzy Creality based printers, you have to turn a knob. Now you can connect to it via USB. They are a Mac family, and they have a Mac that doesn't have any regular USB ports, so I was shit out of luck because I don't carry USB-C to USB Mini B, so there was nothing I could do there. So instead we use the control wheel. Now, the control wheel moves at 0.01 increments. I needed to move 400. So, got my power drill, stuck it on there, and gave it the beans. And within 30 seconds, we were close to 800, and I finished it off manually. And the first bench that thing printed successfully printed great, but I felt a bit like an idiot. And this is a fail for me, right? Again, it's part of this Print Fix Fridays that we have to also be honest about our failures and not just those of the community. I didn't check a really basic thing that I should have, which was, is the power supply set to the right voltage? It was not my knowledge that printer motherboards, especially Creality printer motherboards, would run on a wide gamut of voltages, and that the hot end would still heat up at a reasonable rate at half the voltage it was expecting. It was definitely interesting to see that, and I don't know if I necessarily blame myself or blame the situation, whatever it might be. Like, I wasn't at my shop with my tools, but fixing printers like Enders at my shop and then giving them back to a family, they're going to have to fix it again when it gets to their house. Things will shift during that transit time, and I wanted to make sure that we could do it where the printer is going to effectively live. Needless to say, the printer is up and running well. So, you know, all's well that ends well as far as I'm concerned. But it was a little egg on my face, or at least I felt that way when I realized it. But hey, it happens to the best of us. That's why we do Print Fix Friday, because it is a good way for me to look at what could be some very simple fails and what could be some very complicated fails, and looking at how we can fix them, keep them from happening again. Speaking of which, let's get into the next one. Dialed in all my settings, but still getting delamination around curves. What parameter would help this? I do not believe that you have dialed in all of your parameters. And the reason is, your lines are not touching each other. These are heavily under extruded. This should be the top layer of your part, and it's not right. I do not believe that you have dialed in all of your settings. This can be indicative of a loose belt. It can be, but looking at the rest of this, where in both directions, we have space in between these top infill lines. It leads me to that you're not extruding enough material. Let's see what the comments have to say. It doesn't look like you have any delamination. The part on the left just looks like there's a gap between the inner and outer walls is normal, and the infill makes it look like it is peeling apart. Maybe a little over extruded. Interesting. I would go the other direction. Otherwise, this is a nice print. This is for a Nerf blaster. Nope. Someone says this problem arises when you have concentric top layer pattern. They don't. They have lots of perimeters for sure. Tons of perimeters, but this is not concentric. But what's concentric, we would see it just be lots and lots and lots of perimeters rather than what appears to be monotonic or at least a standard top infill process. I also like the way concentric looks, but it's not the strongest and usually ends up looking like this in spots where it's printing circles and shapes over infill gaps. I would try to remedy this by first changing my top layer pattern to line/zigzag, then adding more layers. That if you still want the concentric look, turn on ironing and set the pattern to concentric. Now that is a great idea if you do want that concentric look, but I don't believe that's, again, what we're dealing with here. From my perspective, we are absolutely under extruding here. Now you might look at this and say, well, Grant, this appears to be over extruding. No, to me, this appears that we are extruding very, very little when it's a Bowden printer, so we have some backlash, and we're waiting a little bit when we do our retraction and Z-hop movement. Now, if this was supposed to be circular, perfectly circular, and these holes are supposed to be perfectly circular, which I believe they should be, we do not have perfect circles, which does tell me that we have a belt problem. And it should look much more circular than this. It should appear to your eye to be a circle, and we clearly don't have that. Now, if we look, it's not obvious to me which way this part was printed, but whatever way it was printed, this axis here, whether that's your Y or your X, is loose, I think. Could be loose, could be tight. It's not right. Your axes aren't right. And so I would look at making sure that your belts are tensioned appropriately. On some of these more affordable 3D printers, at least the old school ones, they used to use springs to tension the belts because they were using cheap belts and the springs would just give you a constant pressure. The problem was under fast movements, those springs could stretch a little bit and you would get artifacting just like this in your prints. But we see it even on the big areas as well, where I believe this is supposed to be a full circle and it definitely has a flat on the top and the bottom. Now, if this is intentional, fine, everything looks okay. But I have reason to believe it might not be. So what can be done here? I would say I don't believe you've dialed in your settings. And if you have, you haven't dialed in your belt settings for your printer itself. Go through and verify that those are actually working correctly. The belt should twang a little bit like a guitar string, but realistically, a benchy is a pretty sufficient way to test these things. The benchy has quite a few circular movement patterns that need to be done. And that is easily measurable because on ct3d.xyz, which is on the bottom of the benchy, has all the information that you would need to determine what and where you can measure things on the benchy. So that'd be my recommendation. It could be a couple of things. I mean, even this belt issue could be dealing with what appears to be under extrusion, but might be a little slop. And to be clear, the belt issue might also be exacerbated here, and we might not actually have under extrusion. What we might have is the belt problem. So take the under extrusion with a grain of salt. I'm not 100%, given that I believe it's belts, that it is also under extruding. I would look at fixing your belts first. Then if you are still having this issue where you have gaps in between your top infill pattern, that you look at adjusting your extrusion multiplier or your steps per millimeter. What is up with my supports? Material PETG, temp 235, Ender 3. You do not have enough horizontal support on your supports. This is not an issue at all. It is just your supports are wiggling a little bit. It is why in Prusa Slicer, by default, when you add support material, it has a 3 millimeter basically brim that occurs for your part that is supported. Let me get a model and show you. Now, something like the E3D buggy here, we're gonna go ahead, for the purpose of the video, just paint on some supports. It's not necessary. The E3D buggy can actually print 100% support free. I tried up there earlier, but it didn't work. So let's support down there. We can see that by default, Prusa Slicer adds effectively a brim on your support, and that gives it more of a attachment point to the bed, keeping it from wiggling too much. As long as your overall print looks okay, this totally fine and I wouldn't worry about it. If you are somewhat worried about this becoming a problem, you can look at adjusting your support material from lines to zigzags or a different pattern that will provide more support. Basically, this isn't a problem unless it actually affects the quality of the printing that you are doing. Moving on, we have a real dangerous failure from one of our Patreon supporters, Omaha 3D Prints. If you happen to be in the Omaha area, go hit him up and you need some 3D printing. He's a good guy. We've got a Prusa Mini with some frayed and now missing wires. These are heater wires, and that is no bueno. And it appears that this might be a thermistor wire, because I see another thin wire going down following the heater path, which does generally mean it is a thermistor wire. This all results in a printer that is, well, a bit of bad news bears. It will not function. There is a pretty easy way to solve this, though. It is to follow the directions and use the cable wrap. This is a
couple weeks later.
And we can see that Omaha 3D Prints has actually fixed and rewrapped their cable. Everything is looking good. It is up along the path of the Bowden tube itself, and the Mini does appear to be printing just fine. That's what we like to see, right? And the failure that they had was a pretty easy one to deal with. Just, hey, replace the wires. But not having cable chain or cable wrap of some sort can cause a lot more problems than you might think. And to be clear, having cable wrap can also cause problems, right? You have excess friction that builds up. You're gonna get yourself an issue. Anyways, glad that it's resolved. Glad the Mini's back up and running. And from what I can tell, they are doing the Toys for Tots drive. So thanks for your support on that. Oh, last but not least, Ivan Miranda. Sir, love your channel. You are truly pushing the limits of big ass FDM printers. And well, sometimes those big ass FDM printers bite back. I posted this photo into our PrintFixFriday channel in the Discord, and my brother, he said, wait, it looks like there's two sets of heater wires. I said, yep. It's a big heater. It's a big printer. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the worst blobs of doom that I've seen, but it looks like the Forbidden Coral, and he has an artillery that, I guess, tried to print something. It looks like it might have gotten clogged and then just made some spaghetti. And then finally, this is another printer, it looks like, that also had a blob of doom. This is the big one that I think he just finished, or finished-ish. Nonetheless, bad news all around. It's never fun. Yeah, it is very, very not happy. Wow. Tasty. Oh, there's heater wire dead. Or maybe that's a thermistor. That might be a thermistor. Tasty. I mean, I feel bad for Ivan because I don't think he deserves this, right? He's really pushing the limits, but that is what happens sometimes. I don't think a silicone sock would have saved him. I don't think that Ricky Bobby would have saved him.
Help me, Tom Cruise!
I feel for you, buddy. Like, we've all had blobs of doom in our days, but I think Ivan does take it to the next level. But yeah, how do you solve this, buddy? I think we said it before. You gotta put webcams on your printers. Because when you're dealing with printers this big, nozzles this big, you know, these big Mosquito Magnum Plus hot ends from Slice, which, do you guys want to see a tour of Slice Engineering? They're about 3 hours north of me total. It's not that far of a drive. We could look at doing a tour of Slice Engineering. If that is something you'd like to see, they're currently at Forum Next, but we can set something up maybe in the new year. We could go over and actually take a look at how they make hot ends. I think it would be a lot of fun. Let me know if you guys would want to see something like that. But yeah, when you're pushing this much filament that quickly, you gotta have some sort of monitoring system on there. And I thought this was a really cool opportunity, and I don't know if it is in this tweet or if in another tweet or something like that. Yeah, it's right here. The Octo Everywhere guys. Hey, congrats to you all, by the way. One, they had a massively popular AMA on Reddit where they're giving away a Mark III's. And I do want to have you guys on the podcast. So Octo Everywhere, if you watched the channel, hit me up. I know we've talked previous and we were waiting for something to be released. I have a feeling this is what you were referencing. But let's get you on the podcast and let's talk about it. But I love that I mean, basically that's the best kind of marketing that you can do, right? They're saying, we would love for you to try a gadget and let us know what you think. They're basically saying, hey, we've got a system that can help detect these failures and alert you to what's going on. Use it. And I don't think it's that difficult for someone with even my skills to integrate something like Octo everywhere. And so Ivan shouldn't have a problem at all. That'd be my best recommendation here, because this does unfortunately appear to be a bit of a commonality with some of his machines where, yeah, okay, you're building printers that have over a meter long in one axis. When you have failures, you don't have just regular failures. You have failures. But yeah, you can definitely see Thermistor wire's broken and he's powering the heaters directly from a lap bench power supply. Totally normal. I've done this kind of thing before. It is what it is. Just kind of know what you're doing if you're going to do this kind of thing, because if you don't, you can burn things. Because right now, while he's doing this, he has no thermal runaway protection, because as far as the printer's concerned, it doesn't know it's heating up at all because the thermistors are broken. So yeah, Ivan, play around with Octo everywhere and maybe even some of the others if that's, maybe not your particular flavor. But I do believe that would help out a ton. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for you all today. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Remember, if you want to get your name with these elite group of Musketeers, you can click those links in that description and join our Patreon or YouTube channel memberships. We greatly appreciate any support that you might be able to give to us. Right below me will be the entire PrintFix Friday series, where you can go back and take a look. Right next to that will be our Orlando Maker Faire video, where we recently went to the Orlando Maker Faire and met some people that you might recognize. I'll see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.